to start?
We're ready right now.
Okay. Good morning. Welcome to the Library Board of Trustees meeting of November 15th. So I'll call the meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the October 2021 minutes. I'll make the motion to accept the minutes. If I can get a second.
Second.
Okay, thank you, Carolyn. Any questions, comments, changes? If not, we'll ask you to approve by voice. All in favor indicates by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Okay, the next item on the agenda is EALs, and again, I'll make the motion.
For the record, we have a quorum, and all trustees are present either in person or virtually.
Okay. Okay, so again, on the EALs, so I'll make the motion to approve the EALs. Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you again, Carolyn. Any questions, comments? Yeah, I tried to identify, so if you indicate any questions or comments from anybody?
I just had a question about,
again, all in favor?
Jim, I had a question about on the second page, the Maryland Coalition of Families, the $11,000. Is that a check we receive for grant funded programming, or what is that?
Mike will answer that. This is Belinda. That is a payment to the Maryland Coalition for a program that the youth programmers do with the coalition, and it's ECAC grant funded, so we will be reimbursed, but we have not been yet.
Yeah, so that's not net money out, that's funding neutral.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Or okay, so I'll ask for a voice vote again. All those in favor of accepting the minutes as provided, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
And motion carries. Sandy, you're next.
Okay, I don't have a report for this month.
Okay.
It'll be coming in December. Do you want to talk about the possible transfer of ownership of the accounts?
Yeah, we'll talk about that later, Sandy, then. Yeah, okay, then I'll just jump in and with the Smaller report. And again, really, there's not much to report. We worked on long-range plans, really projects and undertakings between next year and 2025. And of course, we spent some time too talking about the December 1st meeting, which, as I mentioned previously, is proposed changes to state law that's coming from the state librarian's office. And there's a meeting on December 1st on those proposed changes. Every indication from meeting with the subgroup, the organizing group, is it's going to be quite a contentious discussion. So I'll certainly brief you in December as to the outcome.
Jim, this is John. What would be the impact of those proposals going through?
Yeah, John, there are a number of things, but the primary one is that they would want to really replace the process of electing individuals to the Smaller board. In effect, then the state would take responsibility for that. Again, we're talking about the regionals, nothing to do with the county library system. But that's probably the most significant change, is how to establish board members on the smaller or the regional boards.
Is there some rationale driving that?
They'll basically, John, they're saying to ensure compliance with state law, which, there are some ways that they operate, the regionals operate, that may not necessarily be consistent with the way the statute is constructed. For example, the number of board members has been established, but some have more than the state, none have less. The issue for Smirler in particular, though, is that we are an advisory board, not a governing board. So there are a number of issues, and it'd take me a long time to explain where some of the problems lies across the regionals. But I think fundamentally the concern is for all the regionals that they want to be able to establish their own processes for selecting board members and not have the state take over that function.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if no other questions, then I'll hand it over to you, Michael.
All right, thank you. Let me just grab my agenda here. The first is staff celebrations and specifically hip hip hoorays. And I've got 2 names to add to the ones who are on the agenda. And those are Jeff Powers and Timothy Beers. But thank you also to Nicole Vega, to Elizabeth Davis, to John Guadalajara, to Tammy Jones, to Robert Palmer, and to Jeff Stainbrook. These were all the people who were fairly instrumental in the implementation of the RFID system. And that system is up and running at all libraries and functioning well. So thank you for your role in installing, coordinating, training, and leading for our new RFID system. The new system is functioning well. Employees are comfortable using it. It will improve our efficiency in circulation and inventory. Well done. So I'm told the only people who are having issue with it are some of our youngest customers. They come in with their library books, and they're used to checking them out one at a time. And it's a big deal. So what happens now is if they get close to the machine and they put their books up, instead of scanning one at a time, it just does all of them. And so we're training our youngest customers to only put one at a time so that they can still have that library experience that they like. But for everybody else, it's really, for check-ins especially, it's really greatly increasing our efficiency. And at some point, we'll be able to go out into the stacks with a wand and do much better inventory control than we've been doing. And so this system is functioning well, and we're very happy to have it. And thank you, everybody, for helping train staff and getting everybody ready. It really has been a very painless process for the most part. I do have a budget update for you, and that's in the document. With 37% of the year passed, we are pretty much within tolerance in just about all budget lines and doing quite reasonably well. There are a few where we have paid out more up front, and we're not expecting then as many expenses later in the year. So for right now, doesn't look like we've got any real trouble areas, but what we want to do is, so like, for example, memberships at 74%, but they're almost all paid for the year then. So what we're going to do is, as these budget lines perhaps get down lower, we'll look for areas where we don't think that we will have as expenses and do some transfers and try to make sure that all the budget money for the year will be spent. We are doing somewhat well in our services income and our fines at 57% and 42%. The amounts aren't particularly large, but we were really estimating very low in those areas, so we may get in a bit more than we were anticipating. And we'll have to talk about fines for the upcoming fiscal year later on in the presentation today.
Michael?
Yes.
I just had a question under professional services on page 3. Is your FSA administrative cost, is that something that you pay quarterly or pay up front more? It was at 66%, page 3 under FSA admin. That's the one that jumped out at me.
Sandy, this is Belinda. It's because there was a large bill at the beginning of the year for a compliance test we had to do.
Okay.
Can I ask about the contracts in that same section? We've spent 3,400, which is 113% of what we budgeted.
As I recall, that one was for the unique service, and we got the large bill because we had not been using their services at all during the pandemic. And so what happened was they submitted a bill going back to basically March of the 2020, and they sent out notices for items then. So we got this large bill we were not expecting. We're not going to be getting those anymore, but we will have to do a budget transfer to handle that amount.
Thank you, Michael, and I appreciate your recall of any given line in the budget.
Well, I'm not nearly as good as Belinda, but...
Thank you, Belinda.
So I've already given basically an RFI update. It is functioning well, and it will increase our efficiency. Talk a little bit about our upcoming programming. We're very anxious to get back to in-person programming, and we are already doing some that is outside. So we have a regular gig at Greenwell State Park when they have an open barn. We have a storyteller there. We have done some at our locations. But with colder weather coming up, those will be not quite so feasible. So we're looking to, starting in January, go back to some in-person events for programming. Those will not include programming for the very young, who are not yet eligible for the vaccination, birth through 5. But we are hoping then, starting in March of 2022, to slowly reintegrate those as well back to in-person programming. Now, some teen and adult programming will largely stay virtual, or certainly adult programming, just because we found how incredibly efficient it is in attracting greater numbers than we do when they're in person. So we're going to, as we move forward, look carefully at what our programming is. Some will be in person, some will be virtual on a continuing basis, just to reach as many people as we possibly can. So we are currently working out of schedule of exactly what will be the in-person and what will be the virtual events. All of this will be pandemic, of course, dependent. So you recall that a year ago, an incredible spike began, but the vaccination wasn't available yet. So we need to see what the change in the weather will bring with the vaccination in mind, and just see, are we going to continue with the current, and currently the rate is still high in the county. I share those reports with you. If we suddenly see come February the rate go down to moderate or low, we might institute the in-person programming more quickly. If the rate continues high, or we have a spike in December or January, we might have to push back some of our plans. So they are tentative, but I would say our staff of programmers are excited about the prospect, but not understandably a little concerned. So we are working with them and listening to what their concerns are, and I hope that we'll be able, as I say, to start that in-person programming, especially for the younger set in March, because that does drive a lot of visits to the library and a lot of circulation when we have those programs. We will be having registration for the programs, just so we know who's going to be coming, and if a program has slots available, it's not like we're going to turn, in-person attendees away who haven't registered ahead of time. But it's just going to let us plan better for how many people are going to be there, and it's also assure that we're not greatly exceeding the capacity of the space where we'll be having the programming. So, very careful planning and consideration of staff, but as I say, we're hopeful that we're going to be going back to in-person that quarter.
Michael, this
questions
is
about
John.
that one? Yes.
When you get these reports from the health department, do they break them down by demographic? And the reason I'm asking is, if they do, could your planning for in-person be tailored to how things are trending by the demographic? In other words, I'll make a number, the over 65 bunch or the 50 to 65 bunch?
The reports that I share with you do not include demographic information, but I can get that. And we do keep it in mind when we're doing that. Most of the younger people are at less risk from having serious complications from COVID, but we do know that the schools are experiencing, a fair number of absentees related to it. And if you're a parent, you are probably getting on a fairly daily basis notice that someone in your school has contracted and therefore your child is potentially at risk. So there is substantial transmission going on in the younger sets, but we can use that to plan to a degree. Yes, Michael.
I have two questions. One, can you give an update on meeting rooms and kind of what the thinking is there? And second, is our decision-making tied to specific benchmarks? Like, when the health department says that we are at low or moderate transmission, will that trigger certain changes? Or I just want to make sure, do we have any clear standards or benchmarks that we're looking at to guide decision-making?
The meeting rooms are fully open and can be reserved.
Okay.
And the reason and they have been since July. We had gone back to less transmission in the county, and at that time when we opened them fully, we have not gone back, and the reason why is the libraries themselves are open, so we're not having programming in those spaces, but if a community group wishes to use them, they are open, and we post notice on the website. Here are the precautions we're taking, but we cannot guarantee that this is a safe space, nor can we, anybody can't guarantee that any public space is safe. So it's a kind of at your own risk. And we do ask that afterwards some cleaning take place, but we then take care of it if we feel it may not have been. But the meeting rooms are fully open. We are starting to see some use of them, not nearly what we normally see. Mm-hmm. But as I say, we've kind of, at a certain point said, we are going to offer the services and we cannot protect people. It is kind of at their own discretion.
And in terms of decision-making with any benchmarks from the county data?
Well, typically, as I say, we would probably open more fully with the programming, but that's kind of the one thing we haven't done yet. The library otherwise is pretty much open, and it's guided less by specific benchmarks than by guidance from the county and and this is the county, not the county health department, but the county administration, and by the state. They've opened pretty much Maryland fully. That criticism, I suppose one could criticize and say that came early for St. Mary's County, because if a Montgomery has 99% vaccination rate and Maryland is averaging out then, in the upper 80s or 90s, it's not that the whole state is like that. But those are the guidelines from the state. It's the same as with masking. We could mandate masking in the libraries, but then people could come in and say that's not what the state or the county says, and we kind of then don't really have, as a government-funded institution, as much ability as a private institution might be, where you have to mask. You go to a doctor's office, you've got a mask. You go to a dentist, you've got a mask. In a publicly funded space like the library, we don't have as much freedom to make that call independent from the state.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
Are the library staff eligible for the booster?
Most library staff already have it or are planning on getting it. The county is having an event for its employees coming up, I believe it's this Wednesday or possibly next week. We were eligible for the booster pretty much as soon as it was released because the guidelines from the county health department were people who are at risk through public contact. And all our employees, for the most part, are frontline somehow. Even in administration, we have to go out and go to county meetings, meet with people individually, come to an event like this. So yes, our employees are eligible for the booster, and we are, as a employer, in the high 90s at this point in terms of vaccinations. Almost all our staff have voluntarily been vaccinated. We have a couple of people who are health conditions that do not allow them to have the vaccination, and one person who hasn't been vaccinated, but by and large, our staff are as protected as they can be.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions about that? And again, I think most of our staff are very excited to be getting back to an in-person programming event. They love it. They get a lot of joy from that instruction, especially of younger kids. And the people who come to the programs also enjoy them very, very much. So we're looking forward to that. Going to announce a new partnership we have with the health department. Speaking of the health department, it's telehealth booths. There's going to be one at Charlotte Hall, and there's going to be one at Lexington Park. The health department thinks that those are the locations where they'll be most in demand. So what is this? This is an ADA compliant and sealable booth where people can go and connect with the health department and speak privately about health concerns and get advice.
Not to be confused with getting a medical diagnosis or anything like that, correct?
Well, they'll be able to speak to the health department with what they want about, and we're not really in control of that. We will host the space, and we will we have a system to make sure that people are able to use it. And when it's not being used for that, it can be used for other things. So in some ways, it might function as kind of a de facto meeting space or private study space. But they'll be able to talk to the health department about any of their health concerns.
I guess I'm worried about them going in mistakenly thinking this is a doctor's visit.
Well, they'll be connecting with people who are medical professionals. I've done this through my cell phone during the pandemic. I connect to a nurse practitioner. It is a health professional. It is a diagnosis. There are prescriptions on offer.
Okay.
It's the same as if they were visiting in person the health department, so they'll be able to get those services that way.
It's great news.
I put in the packet just some recent queries from Senator Wyden and Congresswoman Eshoo, the first from California, second from Oregon, made to the Big Five publishers. And I've been keeping you kind of up to date with what's been going on in legislation about library digital content. So these were the questions that they sent to the Big Five publishers. And once before, when Macmillan had its embargo in place, a congresswoman from Washington State sent them a letter, and basically they said nothing in return. The Big Five publishers have all responded to this, and the senator and the congresswoman have not yet made that available, but my understanding is that some of the data the publishers themselves don't know, but the library vendors, the people we deal with who give us content like Overdrive through Libby or Midwest Tapes through Hoopla, or the DPLA exchange through our own Palace app, which incidentally should be ready to go live in December, have some answers. So they're going to send out more letters to those people, and they're trying to get to the bottom of what does digital content cost for libraries? What are the systems under which it's administered? And we in Maryland, of course, have a great interest in this because our law is going into effect on January 1st, saying that we should have access to all digital content on fair terms. And this is sort of an extension of that effort. It's not legislation yet, but I would not be surprised next year to see possibly federal legislation, which will be similar to our Maryland legislation, trying to get libraries a better deal. I still can't announce the name of the big company that before January 1st is going to start making its offerings available. But if you like audiobooks, you know who they are. And we are told that the Maryland law was instrumental in bringing them to the table as well. So I'm expecting an announcement, possibly even this week, about an official signing of a contract for that. But it's been, I think, worthwhile to have that Maryland bill just in terms of getting a couple of the people who were not giving libraries content at all on board. And so I'm very proud of that legislation and very happy to see that at a federal level it's beginning to be investigated. So we'll see where all of this goes.
Michael, is there any anticipation that there will be a resistance to this letter on the basis of, wait a minute, you guys are looking for trade secrets here?
There was some response saying, you know, that's kind of our business, but I don't think that there's anything specifically proprietary here that they're going to be able to claim this is something people shouldn't be able to know. These are public expenditures of taxpayer dollars, and hiding it is going to be a somewhat difficult thing to do. And the terms under which they make content available in libraries is also public information. So I don't think they're going to be able to say that's a trade secret and avoid any of these questions.
Okay, thank you.
The next item we're going to explore in depth in December, and I'll want your feedback on that because it will be part of next year's budget considerations. But as you're probably aware, employment is an issue across the country right now, in that many people are changing careers, are leaving careers that they've been in for a long time, are changing employers, and that a Target, for example, is offering $18 per hour full-time with benefits to people right now. A number of employers are doing the same. So jobs that may once have been less desirable because they were underpaid or didn't have benefits, employers are finding that we're currently in a workers' market and they're needing to adjust in order to attract any employees, much less very highly qualified ones. I've told you that we've had considerable turnover at the library, and some of it has, you're aware, just been many longtime employees saying, all right, it's time for me to go. I've got other priorities right now that the Leonardtown Library has been built, but we're also finding that we're losing employees because other entities in the county are paying more. Now, we're never going to compete with the base, but we have had a number of people who started employment with us and very quickly found that they could apply for and get a job on the base or with one of the contractors at a rate that, frankly, we simply cannot compete with. But what we're looking at very carefully, and I need to thank Belinda, who has come up with 5 scenarios for us, and we'll be presenting those in depth for you in December with recommendations. But right now, what I'd like to talk about is simply the fact that looking at what our anticipated expenses for for this fiscal year are, and our budget, because of many high-level sort of people leaving, we are not necessarily looking at spending all of the personnel budget for this year and looking at it for next year as well. So what we're looking at is where could we do some raises ourselves? And this is not going to be administrative level. I hasten to point that out because this is not going to benefit Michael Blackwell. We're not looking at raising the director's salary. We're looking at our LAs who are currently starting at about 15 and a half. And what could we raise them? And then there's the issue of compression. So if we raise their salaries, then the level above them, the librarian, in some cases they'll be making more than the people who have higher job responsibilities. So you have to kind of think about raising those too, and if you raise those, then where do you stop? Well, the answer is long before you get to my level. But we are looking at different scenarios and how can we make this the most fair. So Belinda has prepared scenarios for raising $1 an hour for starting at $16.44 as the base rather than 15, at 17 and at 18 for our entry-level employees, so kind of competing with a Target or a McDonald's. And we can see that we may have about, well, it's in low six figures for what we may not spend this year. So it's going to be a question of what we can get to. I don't think we'll get to 18 because just for the first level alone, raising that would be $200,000, about $203,000. So when we do the compression, we'd probably be looking at substantially more than we can afford. But it's starting to look like that $16.44 and possibly the $17 based on what we're looking at for the budget this year might be possible, possibly starting in January, but certainly for next fiscal year. And I need to give you those figures once I want to look at them and look at a recommendation. We will also, as part of our budget request to the county, with your permission, because we'll be presenting that to you next month, since it's due in January, to the county before you meet again in January, asking to the fact that the county has not given us a cost of living adjustment in 3 years. And yet their own employees have been given double cost of living in some cases because they did a salary compensation and they raised county employees with extra cost of living, and they raised them with extra step increase. And the county, the library, 1 year basically got nothing. So we would just like to ask them for a little bit of equity. It will be complicated because we're also going to ask for an additional 2 FTEs for the mobile library van. And so we may have a big ask for the upcoming year, but then we'll look at a COLA and a step increase for the existing staff, and we'll factor all that out in terms of what we'd be looking at in terms of raising these salaries as well. But I just want to let you know that we are aware, and our branch managers are especially aware. We've had some positions for which we, didn't have as many applicants as we normally would, and we are seeing a number of people leave just because there's better opportunities, and that just seems to be a way that right now people are thinking more about their priorities, and I certainly can't blame them for that.
Will Belinda's efforts also show us the ripple effects?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Will Belinda's efforts that you said she's working on, will that show the ripple effects? In other
Yes,
words, if we
yes.
do this, here's the
We
downstream
will,
problem.
we will show you what we would recommend that we adopt and the levels to which we are recommending it. And you can have the complete salary scale with what the raises are going to look like if you want them. And I've got that detail already right here. You see it's fairly extensive. But we can share as much as you want, and you have fiscal oversight, so I want you fully aware of everything that we think we can do and that we're recommending trying.
Thank you.
Right now, as I say, it's looking like 16 and a half is going to be possible for at least 3 levels of what we want. And we're going to look at that 17 very carefully. I just don't think we'll be able to get to the 18 with the money we have on hand. But I know that our existing staff will be very grateful for a raise, and it will make us more competitive. And so I went to the ribbon cutting for the Calvert County Mobile Library this past week, and they've got a lovely new mobile library. And they had their outreach staff there of 4 full-time people, and our outreach staff is 0 full-time people. It is hard for us to compete with Calvert and Charles County libraries in terms of their salaries, the benefits, the level of full-time positions. It's hard for us to compete with the Southern Maryland Library Regional Association, SMRLA, who has more money for salaries than we do. So I think that this is much needed. It's just a question of how high we can go.
Where is SMRLA getting its money?
SMRLA gets its money directly from the state.
Yeah, Michael, again, having been involved with issues like salaries and salary adjustments, takes a lot of justification to support, particularly in terms of comparative data. While I realize we can identify certain businesses that are offering starting salaries higher rather, you need to do a lot more in that area. I don't know what the county will require in terms of background information, background support, but typically it certainly includes some external data comparisons other than the
Yeah, understood. And we are doing a salary survey with the state. Unfortunately, it will not be ready in time for our budget presentation to the county. But before they make final decisions about the county budget, we should have that salary study in place. And it's going to look at 25 positions across the library positions across the state. And it will look at libraries, but it's also going to be looking at some outside data as well. And I'm hoping that that will prove to be convincing. But certainly if you were going to compare us to other libraries, you would see that we are at a disadvantage. And while it could be argued that St. Mary's County is not as expensive place to live as Anne Arundel or Montgomery or Howard, it's still an expensive county to live in. So I think that salary study will give us all the evidence we need compared to other libraries and compared to some benchmarks in the private sector. But yes, I'm aware that it's going to be a big ask.
Is anybody hearing anything that would indicate the county has got an employee migration problem just like we have?
Well, the county regularly struggles with some positions. And so, for example, law enforcement has been an issue for the county for a number of years in that we have been paying less than, say, Charles County. So you can become a sheriff's officer here in county and then find that Charles will happily take you on and pay you substantially more. I haven't heard anything about the county across the across the board, but I can tell you that the museum division currently has 8 vacancies at its sort of entry level. So yes, there are other entities in the county that are struggling with this as well. And some of it's hesitancy to come back to a public place during a time when the pandemic lingers, and others are simply that people are looking at who's going to give them the best deal.
Michael, also teachers, education, and it always has, because Calvert and Charles get higher salaries, and right now they are struggling with getting staff, paraprofessionals and things like that. I see signs of employees wanted for public schools, the public school system. So yes.
Yeah, I get job announcements about library postings, and it's only been this past week, since July to last week, that there were not school library positions advertised in St. Mary's County. They could not fill that demand. And the salary is, it's not princely, but it's good, and there's certain other benefits you have from working in a school library. They simply couldn't get people into the positions. So yes, this is not just the library, and it is, in many cases, something that other government-funded agencies in the county are struggling with. That's a good question, though. So full details next month. Right now, as I say, we'll kind of see where we are, but there is some money that it looks like we'll be able to, even without help from the county, be able to do some of these raises at a certain level.
Michael, again, my suggestion would be, though, that if we're going to be looking at this, it's probably a lot of statistical data supporting it. It's just to get it to the trustees in sufficient time before the meeting to go through it all. Because we want to make sure we have the best argument we can.
I can share these figures that Belinda has given me today, and you can have all of them. It's a lot to print out. If you'd prefer to have printed copies rather than having to print your own, I can do that as well, and just arrange for you to pick them up at the library. So you'll be able to see these fully whenever you would like to. And if you'd like them today, I will share them today.
Well, I think we have a lot of time before the next meeting, but any time before, with giving us sufficient time to go through it is fine.
Right.
Doesn't necessarily have to be today, but
Okay.
soon, hopefully.
Are you satisfied, Michael, that the data in front of you is right now solid? I know it's hypothetical, but it's not fluid. So if we're reviewing it now, it's not going to be a wasted time because it's going to change next week.
It shouldn't. What this is based on are the current expected salaries. Now, will it change slightly? Perhaps. I mean, if we have a position that goes vacant and we can't fill it for a little bit of time, there might be a little bit more money available. But we already have plotted in. So, for example, if you complete a certain training that is intended for library associates, you are then due an increase in salary. If you get to a certain number of years worked, you're due an increase in salary. We've got those plotted for this year.
So what you've got now
it shouldn't change
is solid.
much.
Okay.
It should be something that you can base solid decisions on.
All right.
We're not expecting any big changes. So, anything can happen. Let's say I win the lottery and decide that I'm going to give the library $10 million and donate my salary to the library, it would change. Let's hope that happens. I doubt it will. So, some things could happen. One of our branch managers who's been with a more senior position might get an offer that she can't refuse from another library system. But I think it's going to be something, barring really strange events, that you can make solid decisions based on. And I was expecting.
They're here.
They're here. Oh, I'm sorry. I was expecting to have to let them in, and there they are. May I please introduce Rahel Demisi and Chris Lehman from SB and Company, and they are here to answer your questions about the audit. And so we're going to go there. And I apologize. I should have started you at 10:30 and not made you listen to me ramble on here. So.
That's fine. You were on a roll. I didn't want to interrupt.
Yeah. So they are joining us via Zoom. So if you have questions about the audit, you indicated when I presented it last month that there were some things you wanted to ask about. And so the idea is that you ask any questions, that they answer them, and they will then take those in mind and present us with a final version of the audit for your approval next month.
Good morning, everyone. Just to introduce myself, I'm Chris Lehman. I was the engagement partner for this year's audit, and I have Rahel with me as well. Nice to virtually meet you all.
And you too.
Likewise. Anybody want to go first?
And I wish to thank Rahel for her work on this. She was very responsive to our queries.
I don't have anything.
And very patient in explaining details to me, which is a good thing because I sometimes scratch my head and say, what's that?
I think I drew the short straw here. So I'm on page 28 of the document.
That's a good.
So some of my questions are going to be simply because I don't understand your wording. I'm not trying to trash your report or anything like that, but to me as a layperson, there's some things in there that I find a little bit confusing. And if this is to be a document that puts the public's mind at ease about how we're doing, maybe a tweak in language here and there might be appropriate. So beginning on page 28, at the top paragraph up there, the OPEB trust does not have a standalone financial report. Well, I'm not sure that's exactly right in that we do get a December 31st statement for how we're doing.
Yeah, no, and you're correct. And what the GASB requirement is from a footnote perspective is to disclose whether or not there's a separately issued set of financial statements for the OPEB trust. So it's not saying that you guys that the library doesn't get financial information. That's to say that there's not a separately issued set of financial statements for the OPEB plan. Now, the OPEB plan is still subject to audit because it is included within the reporting entity. So the footnotes in the fiduciary statement in that position has been audited, but there's also a requirement to disclose whether or not there's a separately issued OPEB plan report, if that makes sense.
I guess in accounting terms it does, but what I'm saying is that here in this document, maybe a comma, although the OPEB trustees do receive an end-of-year statement or something, just to make certain that the person...
No, I completely, I understand where you're coming from.
Okay. I'm looking on page 29. So we're using the following actuarial assumption applied to all periods included in the measurement. So this one's a little tricky. Because using an inflation factor of 2.2%, everybody knows that's not where we are now. Nobody knows when or how much it may come down in the future. Is there a reason why that has to be the number? And if there isn't,
That's
is there a
something.
better number?
Yeah, and I would say, yeah, actuarial assumptions are always subject to estimate, and this is something that the library's management works with their actuary on to get an annual valuation report that calculates the net OPEB liability. And although inflation, tends to change over time, inflation's gone up, rather significantly lately. Yeah, that's something that the actuary looks at, and they do actuarial studies on what's happening in the industry, or what's happening in the area and across the country. But that's really something that's developed with your actuary. But I would say, just if you look at OPEB plans, across lots of clients that we do, that's probably that's in line with what you would normally see from an inflation perspective. But I do understand there.
So basically, we as trustees on that account, we need to make sure that we and our advisors are up to date on realistic numbers, is what I'm hearing.
Correct. And one thing that
Sorry to interrupt. That report
also does is,
that report came out in June, and I have seen it. It comes from Bolton, and are the actuaries for our plan and the counties. So you've seen that report, and I'm pretty sure that's where that figure came from. At the time, it may have been more accurate than it is right now, but we only get the reports annually. So
Okay.
for this year, I think that's probably what should probably stay, because it is based on that actuarial report, rather than what a figure this month might be or what it might become.
and just to elaborate, what the actuary also does is they base it off certain assumptions going into the fiscal year. So these would have been determined probably back in June or July of 2020. And then what they do is they look at what actually transpired during the year. So if inflation ends up being higher or lower than their assumption, there's an amount that they calculate that does get recognized in the statements. That's a difference between experience, and that's where you'll see, not to get too in the weeds on OPEB accounting, but on the next page, on page 30, when there are differences between assumptions and what actually happened during the year, that does get recognized. On page 30, you'll see a schedule that's deferred outflows and deferred inflows of resources, which is all actual based, which is why you pay Bolton, because there's a lot of complicated calculations that go into that. But they factor in what actually happened against what the assumption was going into the year.
If we look on page 10,
If you go to page 30.
30,
Yeah, but it was just the page right after the one you were referencing with the inflation rate.
okay. So I have a question about page 10, if I may.
Okay.
All right, so at the top, we see as of June 30th, a cash position of $347,000. And trying to find it here. Then if we look on page 23, we see the same number, followed by this sentence: the library's bank balance is insured by the FDIC Insurance Corporation up to $250,000. As of June 30th, there was no uninsured or uncollateralized bank balance. That can only be if we're spread across multiple banks, which this paragraph on 23 does not make clear. Are we?
That I'm not sure offhand. I'd have to check. I believe it's all in one account though.
In which
with
case that
it's with
follow-on-
It's with PNC, yes.
In which case that follow-on sentence is grossly incorrect.
Well, I think what it's saying is either there was no uninsured or uncollateralized, and I believe the bank balance is collateralized, but I could be wrong on that.
Well, either way, it's
It's
over
not
the FDIC
collateralized.
limits, correct?
Yes, it is over the FDIC.
Okay. So,
And then we just have to check and see if it's collateralized, then we could adjust the sentence where it says not insured, and it would
okay,
just be
now,
uncollateralized.
back to accounting speak. When you say collateralized, what does that mean?
Basically, you could have a letter of credit with the bank that would basically still guarantee that amount over 250,000. So sometimes governments would have an agreement with the bank that would still guarantee their amount over the 250,000. But I would want to double check on that to make sure that's the case.
Okay.
To make sure that's correct.
Then if we look still on page 23, further down where the paragraph says statutes authorize the library to invest in obligations, okay? And you have a whole list of things there. The library as of June 30th had 2 Vanguard funds, and that is referenced in this document. But what I'm getting at is, based on that paragraph that begins statutes authorize, does that take into account what the contents of our 2 Vanguard funds are or are not?
That should, yes.
So is that paragraph saying that our money can only be in that list of items?
I believe so, yes.
Well, unless I'm mixing it up, at least one of our 2 Vanguard funds is invested in the stock market.
Okay.
So something's out of whack here.
Yeah, and it could be that that's just the general fund. It might, and I'd have to pull up the state statute again, but that could just be your general fund money needs to be in these items where in your, the amount you're referencing is in your special revenue fund for gifts and grants, which you can get contributions from donors, or that could be any grant money that's in there. Those stipulations would be different than what you would have in your general fund. I don't think state statutes limit what you can invest in. You've got donations.
Just to clarify, that Vanguard Fund is money that is currently managed by the Library Board of Trustees, and it's not part of the library's general fund. And I asked our accountant and Rahel several months ago if it should even be included, since it's not really part of the library's fund, and the answer was yes, it should be, because this is a report for the Library Board of Trustees and not the library itself, or only the library itself. So it did include the trustee funding there, but my sense from what you just said, Chris, is that that funding being managed by the Library Board of Trustees and not the library would not necessarily have to fit into the paragraph that John was just talking about, and our general fund should.
Makes sense.
Right, and I believe a large component of this piece was a historical like a donation that was received a number of years ago that needs to be held intact. And I do believe libraries can receive contributions, whether or not those are in stock or in cash. So that sentence in the footnote would be representative of your operating fund or your general fund.
Could we take that sentence in and clarify it?
There's nothing that would preclude you from having an endowment.
Okay, that's the sentence that I think needs to be added to that paragraph.
Okay.
On page 26, At the bottom. So we see we're insured with State Auto Insurance Company, and it's the last sentence. I just have a question about settled claims resulting from these risks have not exceeded our coverage. Have we had any claims against our coverage in the last 3 years? And maybe that's not an auditor's issue, but I'm
Yeah,
curious.
And I wouldn't know the answer to that.
I'm sorry, I missed hearing. That falls in your lap?
Sorry, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
Or does it fall in your lap?
Yeah, I'm going to interrupt for a minute because we do have a lot of issues. John, one of the reasons why I asked at the last meeting, if you have any questions about the audit, to email me so we could have provided these to the auditors in advance so we can move on. Do you have a lot of questions now to proceed with, or?
I've got a couple
Some of
more.
these are really,
I've got a couple more.
okay, well, what do you, is that couple is two? Is that what you have too?
I have to page through here. I got at least one more.
If you have one more, that's fine, but I think, again, some of these issues you're talking about are relatively minor, and it's just, I think we're better off just giving the question to the auditors rather than really continue as part of this discussion. So if you have one more question, fine, go
Okay.
ahead, but if you have,
I'd be happy to address the auditors with this if they can send me their email address.
I can share that with you, John.
Okay.
And the auditors really wouldn't be the ones to answer that question you're asking right now. If you just direct that question to me, we can tell you any insurance claims that have been made in the last 3 fiscal years against our policies.
All right. No
well,
problem.
Michael, maybe the best would then, Michael, John, if you could copy Michael on any questions you have with the auditors, in case it is a question that he can respond to, rather than the auditors.
All right. How about I just summarize all of those in an email to Michael, and that way, if there are some things that Chris and his staff need to dive into and maybe expand on a little or clarify, that'd be fine.
All right, are there any other questions from any other member of the board?
No.
Nope.
Now, Michael, get back.
Yes?
Are there any other questions? I have to apologize.
No,
I'm having a lot of problems with.
No questions on this end, Jim.
Okay, good. All right, now, when do we need, Michael, to submit this to the state?
Well, officially, it was November 1st, but they're used to delays from libraries. If we can get any questions to the auditor, and it seems like there may be, of the ones John has asked so far, 1 or 2 that would require a sentence change in the audit. If we can get those back before December 20th, your next meeting, and have those to you ahead of time so you can see. I'm hopeful that you can, as a board on December 20th, approve the final version of the audit, and that will be okay with the state.
Okay, yeah, that's my key question, though. Yeah, we will have it approved on the 20th, without question. We have to. So why don't we then finish up this discussion, if no other questions from any of the other board members. And I should point out, so I can appreciate your role because it's the first time. We've all been through this repeatedly. These reports don't vary too much. So yeah, if you could put it in writing, and so we can resolve this for next time.
Well, in that case, thank you so much for joining us. Oh, they've dropped off. Never mind, there you are. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us, and we will have one more follow-up, but I'm hoping that's going to be the last one. Thank you for your patience in working with us and for your careful work on the audit. And again, thank you for your explanations to me, which really helped me understand a lot more of why decisions were made as they were. So take care, and we will follow up very quickly with email.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Moving on, just a reminder that trustee interviews are this evening and tomorrow evening. Those will be conducted via Zoom. There is a statement about the Open Meetings Act that I'll have a paper for you this evening to sign off on, closing that meeting, and anyone of the public who wishes to attend, I can let you into the initial meeting, but basically what's going to happen is instantly closed for personnel discussions as allowed by St. Mary's County and state open meeting laws. Do contact me if you wish to initially be there, but again, it's simply going to open and then immediately go into personnel discussion to have interviews for our board positions. Any questions about that one?
Michael, does it have to be closed again on Tuesday, or is it considered?
No, we're going to close for both and just say, here's the meeting start, here's the meeting end. Yeah.
Okay.
I saw something
So again,
that indicated a little
if it's
confusion.
closed,
Go ahead, Janice.
okay. If it's closed to the public, will we be able to see, is it going to be taped? I know I put that out there, but I don't recall what the answer was.
If you're talking about saving the interviews for later viewing, the answer is no. We would have to have every single person being interviewed consent to that, and I'm concerned for privacy, out of privacy considerations, that basically, this has got to be totally locked down, and I don't want things saved out there. No one's allowed to know who's applied. No one's allowed to know who's interviewed, other than the county commissioners who will receive your report and what your rankings of the different candidates will be. I think, for the out of consideration for the people being interviewed, and also from the privacy aspect, that we will not be taping those interviews.
Michael, there was some,
Okay, thank you.
some confusion about the correct sign-in link.
No.
That's for this meeting.
The sign-in links are correct, but somebody has to open a Zoom meeting session. It's not signing into the session, it's actually activating the session. So I'm going to do that this evening, and Sandy's going to do it tomorrow evening, and that will happen before the meeting takes place. Otherwise, when people click on the sign-in link, it says, wait until host starts session. So when I sat down here, the first thing I did was activate this Zoom session so everybody can then click on that link and log in. So there's no confusion over that, no. And I also sent out appointments, so use the link tonight for tonight's meeting and the link for tomorrow night, which is different for tomorrow night's meetings, and they'll be open before you get there. The session will be ready to go before you get there.
Okay, and just to, I mentioned earlier, I hope to be at all of the meetings, but also I'm sort of initiating by taking the first point, or really not a question, about involvement in other activities and so forth. I hope to be there, and again, everything logistically has been problematic here. So Carolyn, if you could handle that, and if I'm not there at the time, at the beginning.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute. Yeah, no problem at all.
Okay, thank you.
I anticipate being there for all of them.
And
Okay.
what I will do is, when I log in this evening, is Carolyn, when you come on, is I will make you the host, and I will then leave the meeting as we have agreed, since I'm not to be a part of the interviews and the discussions. So you'll then be the host and sort of in charge of the meeting, and then Sandy, because she's opening it tomorrow, she will be the host tomorrow. So
So Jim or me will be the host tonight.
Well, you can make Jim the host, but if he's not logged in, we can't do that.
Yeah, that's the problem, Carolyn, is that I'm not sure I can be. That's, I don't go into long detail, but logistically, I'm not at home and
Gotcha.
have to go back and
Okay.
forth.
Just confirming. Okay.
Yeah. I may be, but again, I don't guarantee.
Gotcha.
All right, well, moving on to our action items then. We have already had the meeting with SB and Company, so we're on to whether or not to transfer those accounts that the trustees currently manage to the foundation. They were originally put in place when the library did not have a foundation, and you've gotten then very few donations to put into those accounts since we have a foundation. Any donation made directly to the library that was not earmarked for one of the branches or for a specific purpose could have been put into those funds. But basically, well, we do have some very generous donors who give us at our branches money each year. They always say this is for, and most frequently it's Lexington Park. But we do have some for our other locations, and they earmark it, so it's not like that goes into the board's general fund. It goes specifically into the library donation accounts. So that's why really these accounts have not been growing to speak of for many years, in fact. So turn it over to you.
So you're saying that anything that is marked for, say, Lexington Park goes into an operating account for the park, not into endowment?
Yes, it goes into the library's funds, but we know how much is donated to each branch, and we keep a record of that. So when a branch, let's say they get a $5,000 donation, and they say, okay, I want to add a $5,000 worth of books, then we say, okay, that's going to come from that account, and we lower that account, but it's in the library's general fund.
Okay.
All right, let me, I'll pick it up from here. And again, Sandy, if you could help me, and
Yes.
just as a preamble, I've lost contact once through the, and periodically the voice dies out on me too. So I'm having some difficulty just staying in touch. But let me go over, I sent you all a memo that outlining, it's rather lengthy, but outlining the research, and I appreciate Sandy and Melinda for doing the background on it. But fundamentally, the two Vanguard funds were set up by our previous board, consisting of donations that were made over a period of time and consolidated into the larger Vanguard account. What surprised me, though, was that I assumed that the Rudolph Fund was established separately through donations that were targeted and in support of an individual named Rudolph. And that really wasn't the case. It actually came from the larger Vanguard, or the sole Vanguard account at that time, and set up as a distinct fund primarily for paying for interns. So a lot of these things, and what they call a core account is another word they've used too, really have all been determinations by previous boards. So there's no attachment to any of the donations that have been given, and they've all been consolidated into these two funds. So my biggest concern was there any attachment? Was there any requirement that came with the donations? And as far as we can see in researching, there were none. So the boards then were making those determinations as to what amounts can be spent, what amounts should be held, and so forth. And so it doesn't obligate us, because a current board can really over not overrule, but change the nature of a fund or any decisions that were made by a previous board. So what I'm leading to, obviously, is that we do have a foundation. We didn't at the time that these donations were made. And since there is no reason that either fund can't be transferred to the foundation, because there are limitations to those funds in particular, I think it's an appropriate time to do so, to move those funds to the foundation. The one I would suggest is that we also maintain an obligation toward, in memoriam, I guess is the way it was set up initially, for the Rudolph Fund that was recognizing this apparently deceased individual, that we continue to make a payment to the library for interns. So it doesn't require a separate fund, but it keeps up the spirit in which that fund was established. So that we could simply say that we're just continuing the same concept, but we're just doing it differently. So my initial thought would be to consolidate those funds and transfer them to the foundation. Now, we looked into it again, and there's a second part. I'm going to go ahead and stop here. Then let's deal with those two separate issues, because the second issue really doesn't require a vote. But so I'm going to make the motion that we transfer the funds from the two Vanguard accounts to the foundation, obviously to be used for the purposes of the library. So I need a second.
Second.
Okay, Carolyn, thank you. Okay, obviously now is the time for questions. So. Okay, are there any questions?
One added point. We did speak with our accountants, ASCII and ASCII, who are tax specialists, and with our attorney, and nobody has raised any objections to this.
Yeah, and I talked to Michael too, Michael Dunn, and he has no concerns. I was speaking on your behalf, Michael, but that's what I recall our conversation indicated.
That was my concern with the foundation. So they are audited, and they will be disseminating or dispersing checks to the library for the interns. I didn't quite get that. So they would handle all of the financial responsibilities for these two accounts.
Yes.
Right, but there's two issues, yes. And Tennessee, in terms of what we now call the Rudolph account, where the monies are going for an intern, we asked them to make a commitment to continue doing that. But they can draw from all the funds, which we have partially done anyway. So it just would simply be keeping that commitment on that particular area, but they can have access to either fund to do so.
But they would manage it.
Yes.
So that's the bottom line.
Yes.
Yes, the process would remain the same, Janice, in that the library would notify, instead of notifying the treasurer of the board, would notify the foundation, here is the amount for the intern this year, and get that amount put into the general fund and pay the intern.
Okay. Thank you.
Does doing it that way not run the risk of depleting the body of the account?
It's the way we've always done it.
Well, what Stanley just said is true in that the board has always used the fund to pay for the intern in the 6 years I've been here now. Has it depleted the fund somewhat? Yes. The advantage to this would be that the foundation would have other funds that it draws upon and could continue to fund the intern, which is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $2,000 a year.
Well, I guess what concerns me is our level of understanding of what constraints might be on the foundation with regard to rearranging the investments if that's what they choose to do.
If we transfer the money in kind right now, then it is up to the foundation to do what they see fit with the funds. I asked today, I talked to Vanguard today, and it's considered a transfer in kind. The foundation would have to set up just to get into the mechanics, what I was told is the foundation would need to open a Vanguard account. They can do that with no assets available at the time, just go through the motions of opening the account, which will require some documentation. And then I would have to transfer our funds, and I would just directly transfer. I would probably just tell them to transfer the two funds as they are. And then if you all decided to combine them or however you wanted to operate them, that would be up to the foundation. Basically, we're relinquishing control. We're saying we trust the foundation to manage the money. The foundation exists to benefit the library, and that's how it would proceed from there.
Well, and I agree 100% with what you just said about the mechanicals, but what bothers me is the foundation then getting a bill for the intern and having that impact their decisions on what they should or shouldn't or have done with the money.
But okay.
They've already agreed, my understanding, they've already agreed to take on the burden of the intern. So this is not going to be a surprise to them. They understand that every year they'll be covering the intern salary.
So basically,
The other thing, you got to remember that both funds are combined, so that they're getting a substantial amount that'll cover interns for a very long time. I mean, it's not, we're not talking about a lot of money to be committed to. It really gives them more money to utilize, not only for the intern, but also for other needs that the library may have.
Right.
That's a better use of the money than locking up two accounts in combination that allows the foundation to have more money available to use for a variety of purposes. And the commitment to the intern is really not that significant, never has been.
right.
And keep in mind, the contributions were made initially primarily for the benefit and the purpose of the library in general. The only one that we've ever set aside for a specific purpose has been what we call the Rudolph Foundation,
Okay.
the Rudolph Fund.
Right. Just to remind everybody of the mechanics of how it works, we had two funds set up, one that I call the general fund and one's the Rudolph account. The general account has right now somewhere between $75,000 and $77,000 in it. That's the one where we were always passed down saying that it had to keep a $55,000 corpus, which we are saying, that another board made that rule. That's something that we could have chosen to, change. The Rudolph account right now has a little over, it's between $17,000 and $18,000. And the way that I was taught or instructed by my predecessors is that we take the dividends earned in the prior year from the Rudolph account and we supplement that from the general account to pay for the intern's salary. The Rudolph account and the general fund have not been earning the same level of dividends that they have in the past. So there was definitely going to be a greater impact on the general fund this year anyway. So we've always protected the Rudolph account in that fashion because we only take the dividends earned from the prior year out of that account to pay. That's how we've done it in the past. Obviously, as we transfer the funds, the foundation can make that determination on what works best.
Any other questions?
Would it be appropriate to have some kind of memorandum of understanding between the
Absolutely.
and the foundation?
Yeah, Michael, I fully agree with you, yes.
Yeah, because I do think it's
Yeah.
very important to lock in the intern funding and, some of the elements we've been discussing here.
Yeah, and I think too, Michael, it's important to convey to the foundation that these monies are being transferred without restriction, without limitation, because we've operated as trustee board, as a treasurer, with limitations that were arbitrary. So we would want to make it clear that we would ask a commitment from the foundation to fund this particular need, but also the funds would be available to support the library in other ways, without limitations, without a corpus or core in each account, which again was arbitrary.
Well, I'm not saying they're going to do this, but it sounds to me like you're kind of choking off the possibility of the foundation establishing a spending factor so that they don't wind up eating the corpus.
But again, the corpus requirement was arbitrary. And why transfer an obligation that fundamentally is arbitrary? And that's the purpose of the foundation is simply to gather in monies and then to be attentive to the library needs and then provide funding as they can. So I think, again, this is all, if the foundation had existed, well, all these contributions were coming in, we wouldn't be having this discussion. But I think it's the rightful purpose of the foundation. And there's really no reason why not to do this. Okay, any other questions? Okay, the motion's been made, so I'm going to ask then, because the amount of money we're talking about and the change that comes from it, if you indicate your approval by raising your hand, so all in favor indicate by raising your hand, indicate aye.
Aye.
Wait a minute.
Aye.
Does this include the MOU?
Yeah, all right, yes, including an MOU.
Yeah.
Okay. Then aye.
Okay, I believe we're all, and again, I'm having trouble with audio too. So the motion carries.
Everybody in person was, or online is an aye, Jim.
Okay, so the motion carries. Okay, Part B, and again, it's really not a decision to be made, but I think something that we should consider. One is, according to our bylaws, the obligation of the treasurer is to manage those funds, not manage the funds, but report on those funds. And now, since that those funds are going to be transferred, it raises the question as to the role of the treasurer. Do we? And I mentioned in my email that, or my summary rather, this is a question not only for this board but other boards. Has a treasurer, but the treasurer doesn't do anything. Calvert does not have a treasurer. I got a somewhat ambiguous response from Charles, but it's certainly the role of treasurer, which is currently vacant, is not really involved in much of the financial aspects of their operations. So it seems like it's a common issue that really what does the treasurer do? And the treasurer really doesn't have much responsibility toward the library itself. I can speculate on why the treasurer position was ever created, but it's certainly not being utilized. So I'm not suggesting we eliminate the position, although that is an option. My recommendation would be simply to leave it vacant. Not as we go through this process now, we're electing officers, we not elect a treasurer, but keep it vacant in the event a board in the future wants to utilize it. So again, we don't need to make a decision, but since we eventually will get to the point of electing officers, I want to clarify this issue now. So I'm not going to pose it as for a vote, but I'll answer any questions that anybody has about the reasoning behind not filling the position of treasurer.
Does the library have any job description or title that is sort of the equivalent?
Yes, our office manager position and our director function as de facto CFOs.
That's in your job description?
Yes. In both job descriptions.
Okay.
Managing of the accounts in the office manager and overall financial responsibility in the director to create budgets and oversee and to approve expenses.
So the office manager kind of functions like the comptroller in an organization.
Yeah, very much so, and to the extent that we have a CFO, it's built into the director job. I wish that we had a CFO.
Jim, before we leave this issue, I just want to make something clear before we leave the issue. I did have success finally after a long unsuccessful hold on Friday talking to Vanguard today. And he let me know that it usually takes 2 weeks or so to establish a new account. So the next steps are going to be, and I can document this in a email to Michael to share with the foundation, but the next steps are going to be for the foundation to open its Vanguard account, and then once we have their account number, I will be able to, with my security standing with Vanguard right now, to call them and transfer the funds. I just have a concern with the month that's left in my tenure on the board. If anything happens, Carolyn and I right now are the two authorized people on this account, and we're the two people that are coming off the board. So if we need to extend anything, I don't know whether the board would be able to grant me the grace to do that, or if I would need to change ownership on the Vanguard account to current board members. So that's just something to keep in mind as we move forward.
Yeah, Cindy, I thought about that. There's no prohibition about the board designating an individual to coordinate that transfer on behalf of the board.
Okay.
You would not be a participating board member, you would not be part of these meetings and so forth and so forth. But I don't see why we'd be prohibited from having you as a external member or external individual complete the transfer if it couldn't be done by the end of the month. One of the reasons why I brought this up today is to give you the maximum time we could.
Right.
But if it does, I anticipate, as you've experienced yourself, is that things don't occur as quickly and easily as we would like. So that's the way I think we could deal with it.
Okay.
Any other questions? And any other issues, questions, points from the board itself?
Well, Jim, I actually have a question for you. I got an email from Ashley, and apparently the Smyrla board was talking about cameras in the parking lot at Charlotte Hall. Is that a concern for you?
Well, then what we were talking about, Michael, was that I asked the question about cameras because she's writing a policy on privacy, and one of the statements that was made in the policy was that if someone wanted to access, even the police, that we would not provide that. I said, well, can you really do that? Because it's not our property. Make it short, is that the only camera being utilized currently by Smyrla is targeting the parking area that was used by the employees. But I mentioned to her, one thing you may want to consider once the farmers market moves out, do you want to look at camera as further protection in the front parking lot area? But that was, again, something that you and she would work out. All I'm saying is that, now you have a lot of reasons for people coming in and out because of particularly during the summer months, spring and fall. But now you won't. So should there be cameras to ensure that whoever is in the external areas of the building, are under cameras and under surveillance if they're there and appear to be somewhat suspicious.
The front of the building does have cameras that's covering it. The parking lot does not. So if there's concerns about having something out in the parking lot, that's something we'd have to work out with the county to install. And they would basically have control of it as opposed to the library since it's their property. But that's something we can do if we think it's an issue. But we do have a camera out back on that parking lot that Smyrla looks at, and we've got a couple of cameras that cover the very front of the building. I think we're probably okay.
Yeah, and again, it was only for you and Ashley to talk about. That wasn't a suggestion or requirement. It's just that once the market is gone, there may be a need for a little bit higher security. But that was simply for the two of you to talk through. And if it doesn't require it, then fine.
That answers my question. Thank you very much. I just wanted to make sure that I was going to handle any concerns you might have.
Yeah, I
Our
know.
next meeting is December 20th, right here in the Chesapeake Building, or virtually or by telephone. Dates to remember, November 22nd, the trustee nominations are due to the county, so please, once you have a chance to meet and interview the candidates, rank at least 3 candidates for each opening. The commissioners have said they're happy to have more than 3 per opening, if you care to nominate 4 for each one, or however many you want to nominate. But we do have to have those to the county before then, so that the commissioners can make that consideration. December 10th is staff day. The library will not be open. It's a Friday. You trustees are invited to come to that day. It will be at Lexington Park. The Friends have generously donated some food for the day, and we'll just have some activities, and a lot of it will be the fact that many of the staff at all 3 locations are new, and a lot of them never met each other. So they know who works at their own branch, but they may never have met people from any of the other branches. So we'll be having some icebreakers. Should be a fun day, so you are invited to that. If you are interested, come on out. I will send you an email with the exact time, but think 9 in the morning, basically. And it will not last all day, more than likely. So if you just want to come for the morning or drop in for a meal, just to say hello to everybody, you're welcome to attend that day. And again, that'll be at Lexington Park. And that's it.
Okay, so then we're close. One other point I want to make, though, if any reason you need to reach me for any reason, if you have a sheet with all the names, numbers, and so forth, contact me by my cell phone, since I'm not at home. Okay, if nothing else, then the meeting is adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
See you tonight.